Well, hello everyone. Welcome. And well, it's good morning here. But hey, I want everybody to understand that we are here from Keep Indianapolis Beautiful. My name is Roland Smith, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement. And I also have my Senior Vice President.
Joe Jarson, Vice President of Program Strategy. Thank you.
Well, welcome to our GreenSpace workshop. So we're going to give you a wealth of information today. So again, sit back, grab a cup of coffee, whatever time of day it is, and be prepared to we're going to take you on a journey of what GreenSpace is and what it can do for you and your community.
Fantastic. Thank you, Roland. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and bring up the PowerPoint. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your interest for our IPL Project GreenSpace program. This is a program in which we're working to create functional, beautiful, resilient, and distinctive places by doing that work with you guys. And so we pride ourselves on receiving applications from the community as this is a grassroots-driven program. We like to help create these spaces, but without you guys coming to us with the ideas and the places, we don't get very far with this project. So let's dive in and kind of talk a little bit about what the IPL Project GreenSpace is about and how you might be able to plug in and take advantage of it. So first of all, the whole notion of this program is about placemaking, community building, and helping restore our urban environment to be a little bit more natural and respectful of native plants and animals. So we're trying to connect people to nature as we do this. We're creating vibrant places as we do this. And as we do this, we're working together and creating something that will be around for quite a while for our communities to use and enjoy. Placemaking for KIB. This is a big topic right now across the country. A lot of people are doing this work, and they're doing it in a variety of different ways. But for Keeping Indianapolis Beautiful, placemaking means a variety of things. Some people across the country call placemaking effective when it is lighter, quicker, and cheaper. And that is oftentimes the case. Sometimes I like to joke about the fact that sometimes KIB, we're heavier, slower, and more expensive. But what's good about it is that we are taking our time to work very closely with communities to make it work. Effective placemaking is all about trying to keep people's eyes on the street, like Jane Jacobs used to write about, helping create a safe community for us to enjoy and bringing the community together to work together towards something that is important. We were talking about grassroots-driven projects. What we mean by this is that these are projects that are starting in the community. You guys are coming to us and helping work with us to come up with an idea that you want to create that will help benefit you and your neighbors. And there's always the debate over whether this is form over function, if it's the beauty that we're focused on versus the actual function of the space, or is it the other way around? And for each of us, that's maybe a little different. It depends upon the project. But what is most successful is when we can find the balance between the two and make the space both beautiful and functional. KIB has, a long time ago, we started to think about, well, if we're going to be creating these spaces across the city, what are we trying to really focus on? And what are those essential elements that we're trying to create? And I think that boils down to these 5 basic points. We're doing this work because we first of all want to engage our communities and help get them to be more involved and engaged in not just the design and the implementation of it, but also the long-term care of these spaces. We used to do a lot of these projects across the city, and that work, we have worked on to try to put a little bit more emphasis upon that engagement work so that we're bringing neighborhoods along with us. And we found that has been really successful because we have these spaces cared for a much longer period of time. The second thing is reflecting our neighborhood's heritage, culture, and values. We don't have a design that we have in the desk drawer that we can just pull out and place upon any community across the city. We understand that neighborhoods are different. Even though we're one city and we all share this common identity of being in Indianapolis, each one of us are different in our own ways, and we all have different approaches to our work. And we want to have that reflected in these spaces and have your neighborhood identity reflected in that. Here in Indiana, we know very well that we don't just have 1 or 2 seasons. We have 4 of them, 4 very distinct seasons. And we hope to create places that are beautiful in each of those, that you can enjoy it, whether it's in the heat of summer when the plants are vibrant and growing, or in the dead of winter when it's cold and a little snowy outside perhaps. We want to have people being able to enjoy these places. Fourth, it's very important for keeping Annapolis beautiful to really help people understand the importance of native plants. Native plants provide a lot of benefit, not just to the beauty of our spaces, but also to the natural habitat that surrounds us, the birds and the plants and the bees and the insects and the butterflies. All these things are interwoven, and native plants play an integral part in that. We have drastically changed our urban environment in our cities. And so our work here is an attempt to try to bring some of that back and have a little bit of an environmental focus on these projects. And of course, lastly, like we were talking about before, we want to try to have these spaces be functional, beautiful, distinct, and resilient. So as you are thinking through your projects and what you're trying to think about, these are some things about placemaking that we really want to try to highlight for you and help you kind of consider and think about. First of all, what's the space look like? How is it defined? What's around the space that might help us develop what that space will look like? Are there some built environments, buildings and roads and pathways that we should be considering? Are there some natural elements, woods or a creek side that we could be incorporating into this? Let's design it so that it's on our scale, not something else that we're trying to make it be. Let's make sure that when we're thinking about these spaces, let's think about what we're going to be using them for. So you might want just a space for a big block party. Well, if you're going to want a big block party, then you're going to need a lot of open space perhaps. But perhaps it's a place for quiet contemplation, and you can make it a little bit more intimate and quiet. Well, let's think about those purposes and let you think about those purposes when you're working on your application. Let's also think about that relationship between the space itself and its surrounding environment. What are those? Is the built environment around the space focused on residential use, or is it more commercial and business? Let's create a space that might help promote those things. If there's a bunch of homes around it, we're probably not creating a big area that we're going to be having big concerts in. Or if it's something that is there, maybe there's a restaurant nearby, perhaps this is a great opportunity to create a little picnic area for folks to bring their food out and have dining outside. And then let's also think about how we're going to be able to use this space. And we want to create a space that's not just beautiful, but functional. We want to create a space that will be actually used and enjoyed by the community, not just looked at necessarily. Although perhaps there's some projects out there that we are just looking at, and we have created some of those as well. So it's balancing between the passive versus active type spaces. So as we talk about placemaking, there's a company or a group called Project for Public Places. And this is an organization based out of Brooklyn, New York. And their focus and field of study is all about placemaking. And some of these slides I've taken from some of their work. And I've really appreciated being able to utilize these because they illustrate pretty well about the types of placemaking that we're trying to create. Here we have 2 different projects or 2 different sites. One up on top where the designer has put in a big open area with some benches. There are some trees there, which is good. The activeness in this space seems to be not as busy as the one down below, where you have a lot more on the human scale, a lot more interaction, a little bit more place for congregation. You can see the shade on the sidewalk, so there's a lot of space where people are congregating in the shade versus up above, where in the sunlight there is not a soul to be found. You have kids on bikes, people walking their dogs, shopping. When we zoom in on that bottom photograph, we can start to see all the various things that are happening. And what Project for Public Spaces likes to emphasize is this power of 10. You have great, good placemaking opportunities when you have at least 10 things to do in a particular location. So here you have, in a matter of just a short distance on one sidewalk, 10 different things that you can do in that space. And what this creates is an opportunity for gathering, people being around, creating a safe environment, creating a space that what we're trying to get to with this area, which is interaction and enjoyment of each other's company. And that's what we're trying to look at when we're thinking about these spaces and how they're going to be used. Even if it is a less active space than this, let's still think about what 10 items we might be able to do in that space. And they don't need to be really large programmed ideas. As you can see here, sitting and relaxing is actually one of the things you can do. I like to suggest that another thing that a person can do in a space is weed. Because as we know, after we create all these spaces, we want to make sure we keep the native plants growing and the weeds out. So here's placemaking at its largest scale. This is, again, in New York City in Bryant Park, and just another way of illustrating the power of 10. We will not be creating a space this large with any of our green spaces, but what is nice is that it just makes it so blatantly clear about all the various things that you can possibly do in one space. You have the big lawn, you have a cafe, you have a carousel. As much as we would like to put a carousel in some of our green spaces, that's not something we'll be able to do for KIB, but there are a lot of variety of things that we can do and be creative with you about. And that's part of the fun of the design process and the engagement process is listening to your ideas and thinking about all the things that you would like to do in a particular location. And how can we do that in a creative way that helps meet your goals and interests and engages the community around us. When we were talking about considering the area around your space, this is exactly showing what we mean by that. It's not just thinking about the 10 things that you do in that space, but what are the things and the interactions that space is having with the people and the places around it. So this slide is showing how that space is reaching out like an octopus with all of its arms and its tentacles, reaching out to the residents and the business owners and the pedestrians and the people who are driving by. How might they interact and view and maybe stop and enjoy this space? How might this space draw them into it? And as we create our spaces with you, we also want to be thinking about that too. How will our location that we're creating in this place reach out and interact with the neighborhood around it? So again, this is an illustration of not effective placemaking. I like this quote: "It's hard to create a space that will not attract people. What is remarkable is how often this has been accomplished." So think about that. What we're trying to say there is that when you think about all the public spaces that are created in our cities, in our urban environments, how many of them are actually successful in bringing people together? So often we create these big plazas out in front of buildings, and we think, well, we'll put in some trees, we'll put in some benches, and people will just flock here and they will want to be here. But that's not necessarily always the case. I don't know how you might feel about this particular slide, but there's not much about this that makes me want to go and enjoy that space very well. First of all, if I have my office in that building, I'm trying to look for the front door on this building and I can't see it. So I don't even know when I leave my office if I'm going to be popping out into this location or not, or if I'm going to have to walk all the way around the building to get to it. So there's absolutely no interaction between this building and the plaza. So therefore, you have your captured audience in the building not being able to easily access the space. So there's that one. Second, you have all those trees there, and I don't see very many benches or things that you could be able to sit underneath those trees. And then you have this monster plaza with all these steps out in front, and I don't really understand what the point of that is. We don't really know why you're going in there, what's going to happen there. It doesn't seem to be any interaction with a stage, like this is made up for a large concert hall or whatnot. Even if it were, that is concrete. I'm not quite sure if I want to be sitting on concrete on my blanket. It's an uncomfortable area. So the point is when we're creating these spaces, we really got to understand people's needs. What is it how are they going to get there? What are they going to do when they get there? How are they going to make themselves feel comfortable when they get there? And these are all aspects of what we got to be thinking about when we're going through a design process, even if it's a space, a little vacant lot, green space that we're going to be creating with you. So here's the alternative. Here's another example where you have a little bit more of an interaction between the natural elements, the shade of the trees, some benches underneath those trees, what appears to be some stairs going down into an area that is a public performance area, so you can have public art in that area. And I think the next slide here shows how that same space has been activated. It's been activated by bringing people down through events. And so that's definitely one way that we can program our places. And we have a couple of examples of that later on that Roland will talk about, where a couple of our green spaces have really been successful by bringing people to them and having specific events for the neighborhood there. We won't stay on this slide too long, but what I'd like to talk about in this particular slide is basically kind of how we expect our process to go with our design work with you. So don't feel like you need to come to us with all of your ideas all clearly defined and outlined. That's part of the process that we will go through with you. But having you spend a little bit of time thinking about it before you make your application is always helpful to us, because it allows us to better understand what you're trying to accomplish. And so when you look through this process, what we like to say is that KIB is basing our placemaking development, leading that through community-based leadership. This means that we are going to start with you guys. Everybody who is working with us on this is going to help tell us what you want to see in your space, not the other way around. And that's going to be happening in a variety of different ways. First, you can see at the top, you want to define your place. So tell us where you're going to be putting this green space. You want to identify those stakeholders, and that's a process that we'll work on with you if you are awarded your application. Let's identify the people who are going to be helpful. Let's identify the people who may not be helpful, and maybe we need to be reaching out to them and see if we can answer their questions and have them become more engaged in this project. We'll need to evaluate the space, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that here in just a little bit. We need to identify any issues that we might need to be aware of. We also need to kind of understand our vision. What is what's the space going to be used for? What are those short and long-term opportunities that we want to accomplish with this? And then lastly, we always have to make sure we're considering how we're going to be taking care of this space, both in the short and in the long term. KIB has placed heavy emphasis upon long-term care and maintenance of our spaces. In fact, so much so that we've created an entirely new program called our GreenSpace Sustainability Program, where we will work with you for 2 years after very closely to helping make sure that you and your other neighbors are understanding what needs to go into maintaining these spaces. And then we'll hopefully remain and keep engaged with you for the duration of your space. So here's a couple of before and after shots that we wanted to share with you guys, just to kind of illustrate some of the ideas and projects that we've worked on in the past to give you a little bit of an understanding about what we're looking at. So here is Page Booker Park. This is in the RMS 10 or the Rivoli Park neighborhood on the east side. Obviously, like any good before shot, we like to take it on the worst day possible. There is some sun there, but lots of flooding that had happened there. So when we came in, we worked with the neighborhood, figured out what we wanted to do. This was back in 2007. You can see that in the caption down below. Worked with them, figured out what we wanted to do. And we ended up creating this beautiful space with the neighborhood. It's a playground, picnic area. There are some girls in the back. Paige Booker was a young girl who had died in the neighborhood. And so it was really impactful to the neighborhood to remember her and remember the memory of her. And so this park is a tribute to her memory and to the youthfulness that she represented and brought to that neighborhood. As you prepare to apply for your project, here are some things that we wanted to keep to help you think about as you prepare your application. First of all, like we've said, we need you to identify your project. It could be a vacant lot that you'd like to turn into a pocket park. Could be a median in the middle of the road that you would like to turn into a green space. We've done that down in the Bates Hendricks neighborhood on New Jersey Street. There's a large median there that we helped work with the neighborhood on for a green space. Maybe it's going to be a combination of a variety of uses, including all these, meditative, recreational, gardening, so forth. Next thing you're going to need to do is to identify your team. it's going to be really important to think about that you're not just doing this alone. In fact, if you are working on this project alone, we will probably will not award this project. This needs to be a team effort driven by you and your neighborhood, with lots of individuals being involved and providing input. One person won't be able to maintain these spaces when we're finished with it, and neither will we be able to be creating a great space that will be reflective of the neighborhood if we only have you working on it with us. We need to have a team of folks. And then lastly, let's think about the connectiveness. Let's bring neighborhood leaders who can have lots of expertise, people who might have some resources and skills that might be able to help contribute towards the creation of this space. Maybe some businesses and churches or other organizations that you are aware of and have great relationships in your neighborhood who would like to be involved. So here we have the Windsor Park Gateway team that came together. This was the initial team of folks who were involved, although the team was much greater than these 5 individuals. In fact, the property owner who lives in the house in the back of that slide was very integral in the long-term maintenance of the space. And you can still see this space and some of their other locations today. And this was a space completed over 10 years ago, which is just hard to believe, but it still looks beautiful. And when you're thinking about your team and your neighborhood, let's think about your capacity. As I was saying, KIB does provide a 3-year commitment to our projects. That's 1 year to create and 2 years to provide maintenance support. We're right there alongside you. We do remain alongside you long after that 2-year period, but during those 2 years, we're really a little bit closer of a relationship than afterward. So that's really important to keep in mind. We also got to think about what the commitment is from your neighbors for the long haul on this project. Of all of our programs, this is probably the most intensive project or program that KIB has because we're creating a big space. It's basically creating a small park. And when we create that, these parks need to be safe and inviting and attractive for people to come in and use. And so that's going to take a lot of work from you and your neighbors to be involved. And so we want to make sure that we are having the commitment of a lot of individuals here to be involved. And we don't want to create a space that's going to be too much for you to take care of. So that's why the conversation is so important to have you alongside us to help us understand what is it that you can actually help maintain and how will you actually do it. Let's also consider the site's capacity. I was referencing this a little bit earlier here. We really need to understand your space and what the space entails. This is a great example to show this because this is a Ballman Park. It turned out to be an amazing, beautiful project that the neighborhood still loves and takes care of today. But when we first started working on this, you can see this is 4 lots that are empty. The neighborhood came to us, wanted to put in a big park here that would include some native plants, a playground, a shelter, and a large lawn area for playing soccer. But of course, when we got into it, when we're planting plants and trees, as you can imagine, you need a little bit more than 6 inches of soil. We went to start digging, and a little bit less than 6 inches down, we hit asphalt. And we went to another area of the lot, hit more asphalt. Again, asphalt was throughout this whole area up until you see where those trees are, which would have been the vast majority of where our plants would have been. And so this was a big surprise for us, a learning curve for us. Luckily, at the same time as we discovered the asphalt, somehow, serendipitously, we met a company that had reached out to us and wanted to donate some of its services. And that company happened to be an excavation company. So I don't know how that happened, but that company came in and was so helpful to us to remove all the asphalt that was underneath this lot. Some of that asphalt included some foundation work from an old substation that was back in this area. And we tried to bash up those foundation pieces as best as we could, but realized we weren't going to be able to get them out. They were way too heavy. We could push them around, but we wouldn't be able to remove them. And so we worked with the excavation company to properly place them here in the corner, which could, one, be a functional purpose to help protect this back area where the playground would be from any cars that might be coming down that alley. And so that would be one thing. But it also serves as a way to be beautiful in a way, because the group that we were working with in the neighborhood called themselves the Building Blocks. And in a way, these blocks kind of represented the building blocks of the neighborhood. And so we kept them, and both from a symbolic and a safety perspective. So it worked out actually quite well. Here's a biggie. Let's not do any work on property that we don't own ourselves or that the property owner is not involved with. We will require all of you guys who are working with on property that is not owned by you to be signed by the property owner. We don't want to get involved in a project and then have the property owner come out and ask us what the heck's going on. Also, we don't want to we want to make sure the property owner is very clear about what's going on, so that they can be expecting to help be supportive of the space for quite a while. There was a project once, in fact, where we were working with the property owner, so they were right on board with us. We put in a beautiful green space with them. It was a little pocket park with some native plants and so forth. A few years later, all of a sudden, the property owner actually owned a business right next to the park. A few years later, unfortunately, that property owner felt that they needed to have additional parking, and so they mowed over the green space and put in a parking lot. Fine for them. Unfortunately, it was not fine for us or for the neighborhood, as we lost that big investment. So not only is a property owner asked to sign the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, to be supportive of this project, but also we want them to be involved with the process and be committed to holding this space as long as we possibly can, so that way the neighborhood can really enjoy it for a long time into the future. When we're reviewing our projects, one of the ways we try to take an objective approach to our review is considering what our other resources are around the neighborhood and around this green space. And so we at KIB like to map a lot of things. And so we have a number of dots on this map here showing you a variety of elements that we consider when reviewing these projects. So these are things that you might want to think about as you put together your project. Consider if you're in a reconnecting to your waterways priority area. Maybe you are in a quality of life neighborhood. We would also like to know just kind of what kind of involvement and investment KIB maybe has had in your neighborhood already. You know, do we have other volunteers who have helped us plant trees or led great Indian cleanup projects, or are adopt-a-blockers? Those are folks who can be very much involved and engaged in our program, and want to have them be involved. And of course, we'll get into cost in a little bit, but do we have any funders that might be involved, or what would be the cost investment that KIB would have to help put into this project? These are all things that we are considering when we are looking at these projects. Soil testing. Some project sites will probably be needing to be tested more so than others. Applicants should do this before making the application, and you can utilize the services and resources of Marion County Health and Hospital to help you understand the soil condition of your property. If you are putting in a garden, a community garden, or perhaps a playground, we would highly recommend that you take the steps needed to look at that soil. All right, I'm going to wrap up these last few slides here before handing it over to Roland with just a quick overview of our GreenSpace program values. Again, when you go onto our website, you start to fill out the application, the first few questions are all going to be focused around the program values and how your space meets these. So the first two are about placemaking and community. We've talked a lot about placemaking already. Again, this is all about how we create a design that will promote the interaction, raising the broader spirit and aesthetic of the neighborhood. How do we do that in such a way that will be helpful in promoting your neighborhood and its heritage? And community. What will this project do to help bring together neighbors and residents together? How might it create new partnerships between your neighborhood and businesses or churches and others in that neighborhood? And let's talk about both of those things. Let's highlight those ideas in the application. Of course, from keeping Annapolis Beautiful's point of view, one of our biggest emphases focuses is on the environment. And so you'll receive a half a point for each one of these pieces: air, soil, water, invasive removal, the impact on wildlife like the birds and the bees and butterflies, and the element of change. How big of a change will we be seeing out of this project? So when you're working on this, think about how your project will impact the air and the soil or water. And another real big one here for us is the maintenance idea, both short and long-term needs. If we're going to be planting plants, we're going to need water. So where are we going to be accessing water for watering these plants? If we're planting plants, you're going to have garden beds there. There inevitably will be dandelions and other weeds that will infringe upon that. How are we going to make sure we keep those dandelions down? Also, if we have any hardscape pieces, if we're going to install a piece of art like you see in this picture, how will we make sure that that art is maintained? If it is tagged with graffiti, how will we be cleaning off that graffiti? And how will we be doing that in a quick way to discourage any future tagging happening? I believe these are our last two pieces, or last two values that I want to talk about here, which is public art. Like I was saying, part of our goal here is to make our green spaces 4 seasons of interest. And so one way we can do that is by installing public art, or also putting in interpretive panels that will tell the history about the particular location, or a little bit about the heritage of the space. Here we're looking at a piece of art at Speedway. One of my favorite places that we've promoted the heritage of a space is at Ransom Place, where we talk about Madam Walker. These are great ideas, and these are things that you should be thinking about. Is what is your story? What's the story that you want to tell, and how will we best do that? Would it be through telling it through a historic perspective, or might it be through a beautiful piece of art? We will be working with a couple of our great partners, the Arts Council of Indianapolis and the Indiana Historical Society, to do this work with us. And so, again, that's something to think about. And of course, lastly but not least, lasting value. How will we create a space that will be alive and vital to the neighborhood, and how might you program it in years to come? So I think that covers that for me. At this point, I want to hand it back over to you, Roland, and you can kind of walk us through the example of Devington.
Thank you, Joe. That was a wealth of information, and it will definitely make your application very competitive when listening to all the information that Joe gave you. And right now I want to take you through the journey of actually putting and implementing a green space within your community. So today we're going to use a very good example over at Devington Transportation Hub. It's in the Devington community. We're on the east side. And this opening slide just basically just shows you the area in which the community wanted to transform, just to give a sense of, number one, beauty, and number two, the bus stop itself. It was just a shelter, and they wanted to make sure that they used that space to bring lasting value, and of course, a place where people can come together. And of course, when they're waiting for that bus to come, that is just an inviting area that people can sit, they can read a book, or just something that everybody could come together and cherish for the community and bring a sense of pride. So this, whenever you actually are awarded a green space within our program, you will be connected with and Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll be connected with a designer. And so the designer will actually provide a rendering of what your vision will look like. And so within the space, the community wanted to create an inviting and natural gathering place, create a neighborhood pride for students to seniors, sustainable design, and then they wanted to reduce crime and create connectivity. This area, this is actually the plans for the new apartment or senior living space that was going to be developed for the area. And so I think they wanted to basically complement with the new bus station within the area. Joe, if you wanted to give a little bit more background around this.
Oh, slide. Yeah, sure. No worries. Just real quick, that This was a space that had an older apartment complex that was unfortunately a center of crime. The neighborhood itself had invited and wanted to have BWI, the development company, come in and try to remove that, well, demolish that older apartment complex, build this property that would be very well connected in with that bus stop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, here's the shot here that you can talk about,
Mm-hmm.
Roland, of the apartment complex that was there, and what they were trying to work on to create in its place.
Yes, and as you can see, it was definitely time for a change. So the new additions to the area will definitely bring a good quality of life, and adding a bus stop within that area will definitely enhance it as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then these bricks that were, we blew up this photograph a little bit because you could see right there in the center of the screen, perhaps those blocks there. Just keep those in your back of your mind, because when we're talking about resources from the neighborhood, we're looking for all kinds of things that we can incorporate into our green spaces. So I think the next slide will maybe show those in a new design.
Awesome. So yeah, what Joe was alluding to was those, well, the community wanted to make sure that they had something from the past that represented within the future of the project. So you see how the designer put together the cinder blocks within the project, and I thought it was a very artistic approach of how they included all of those aspects from the neighborhood of old and make sure you bring it into the neighborhood of the future. Also, historic seats and reclaimed pavers. So as you can see within the rendering, you saw that they had puff seating, and I think those seatings were from the old Bush Stadium, am I correct?
Yep.
They wanted to use something from the city to actually add an additional artistic element to that, the bus hub. And so, and here are the cinder blocks that they actually use within the space as well. All right, here, when this is the opening, right?
Right. Yes. Oh no, this was actually the groundbreaking for the apartment complex, which was also helping us gather support and excitement about the bus stop itself too, raising awareness about both projects.
Yeah, this is great. So you see who was all involved. Everyone came to be a part of the project, especially those that came from the community, and a couple celebrities as well, and of course, back in the day, the mayor.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we did, Joe hinted to having a committee together to actually move your project along. And so everyone here, I love all the faces that were actually in this slide, but this is the committee that was involved in actually putting that whole entire project together. And as of course, you know, the excitement was just abundantly throughout the whole entire photo, but everyone there had their hands in putting this together, of course, and we're going to talk about how they reached out to the community in regards to like the engagement on the project as well.
Yep. And many thanks. The guy with his arms up in the air, that's Will Marquez from With Purpose Design, a wonderful designer that has worked with us on many different projects. So,
Jim Knopf's expression is cracking me.
Yeah. They were a great team, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the engagement aspect I think is very exciting, especially for me. So as you can tell, there's a high school within that area as well, called Arlington High School. And the committee reached out to the school to have them be a part of the project as well. And so as you can see, they're all looking at a rendering or something that was put together to help the students get a sense of what the project will look like. They gave their insight on what they can make the project better and how they will want to be involved. And so how they included them, they had the students, and if you remember those cinder blocks that we talked about earlier, the students actually took time after school to actually color those cinder blocks, the color of the rendering, just to make sure that they had their hand in the project as well, which I thought that was very smart for them to be engaged on that end, because it gave them a sense of pride of being a part of something that was going to make the community beautiful. Also, the students also wanted, and others wanted to figure out how they could add an artistic element within that bus stop as well. So they were looking at how they include the school, how they include their mascot. And Joe, please remind me what that picture was in the down the left corner at the bottom.
Oh, I believe it's a artist that they were wanting to incorporate. I think the purpose of that was that they were wanting to really show that they wanted the art piece to be inside, that would be in the bus stop, would be artistic in nature and be somehow reflective of their interest in art.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so time to get to work. So KIB, of course, our partners and friends and people that are involved in the project decided to go ahead and start excavating the area. So as they get to work, you'll definitely see how we brought out many people that are key folks within their work to help. So we want to make sure that not only the community was involved, but we brought out people that would actually want to make sure the project was actually done right. And so, Joe, if you want to speak to anyone in particular that we needed to make mention in regards to like the type of people that we put on the project, just to make sure that.
Once we get into this part of the project, we're going to have Ethan Olson, who's our director of native landscapes, be very much involved. He will be with our team of folks on our staff leading the implementation, and we'll be communicating with you to help you guys as volunteers understand what kind of work we'll be doing at each workday, and help you get the right information so you can recruit the right volunteers to come on out on any given day and be part of that implementation process. Yeah, so you can see here, work can be of all sorts of levels.
So you see those cinder blocks that those students were working on, they're going right into the project, and as you can see, they look absolutely beautiful. So again, as they're putting in those cinder blocks, we have people around in the area also attending to the GreenSpace as well. I guess you can go to the next slide.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And as the slide progresses, it is definitely an eye catcher. So we're loving how the actual project is turning out. And as you continue on, and this is the end result of the project. And as you can see, the puff seating is available. As you can see, the cinder blocks are installed. And of course, they added additional sheltering so people can have coverage from the sun. We're waiting on the bus to arrive.
Right. And then the art was also included there. You can see a quote from Maya Angelou, and then the butterflies, and there's a little caterpillar. All those things were added in afterwards to kind of help represent that artistic piece that the students wanted.
Absolutely beautiful. Okay. There's no value in life except what you choose to place upon it, and no happiness in any place except what you bring to it yourself. Henry David Thoreau. And I really love this quote because it definitely brings a sense of how a community can bring a sense of pride to a project. You can throw anything in within the neighborhood, but unless they have their hands in it and unless they have some skin in the game, it definitely won't mean as much to you unless you could put your hands on it within yourself. Yep. All right, so deadline for the application is May 31st, 2020. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. My email is rsmith@kibi.org. If you want additional information on the project within itself or the program, please feel free to visit our website. And of course, if you have any additional consult questions, or if you want me to talk to you personally on the application, I definitely can help you as well. And then, of course, after this meeting today, you will receive a follow-up email that gives you just a list of everything that you'll need to know before applying. Okay. All right, and so that concludes our presentation today, but we do have a couple of frequently asked questions that we wanted to go over before we left. So I'm going to play the audience and answer the questions.
All right.
So, one of the questions that frequently comes up is, how much should we apply for?
Okay, so how much should we apply for? Right now, at this particular moment, what we like to say is that, first of all, the RKIB IPL Project GreenSpace projects are not monetary grants. There will be no exchange of dollars here from money from KIB to the hands of the neighborhood. What we'll do is use our funding to purchase the resources and materials that we want and need to implement your vision. So right now, what I would focus on as you create your application is, what is it that you wish to see, and what is it going to take to create your design and implement that into your space, keeping in mind all of those things that we were talking about, your own capacity for maintenance and care, to what you want to use this space for, and all that sort of thing. So think what you want to do.
Good. And then another question that comes up: should my soil be tested, and is it required?
Right. What I would suggest is, again, if you were looking at having in your location or in your place a playground or a community garden or something that's going to be really utilizing or impacting that soil quite a bit, then you should definitely have that soil tested. Roland and I can get you the contact information for the folks over at Marion County Soil and Health, Marion County Health and Hospital, different organization. And they have some resources there that will help you get that soil tested. If you are wanting to just test it anyway, no matter what the use of it is, we can still make that happen and do that research for you.
Awesome. Another question: who should be on my committee?
Committees are very important to put together, right? So we got to make sure that when you submit your application, at the very end of the application, there'll be 5 spaces for you to list out people's names specifically who will be involved. These will be the first folks that we'll use as our primary point of contact, the committee of folks that we're going to copy on every email, call when we're running to organize community meetings, work with to do the outreach with the neighborhood. These will be the main folks involved. So let's think through, who are those great leaders in your neighborhood that will work alongside you? Who are your friends? Because after all, we want to have some fun with this project. So people you're going to want to work with and enjoy working with. And then I think, Roland, you had a good idea. You and Gerardo, you should share that one too.
Yeah, and I love what Joe just said, but just think through how everyone can be involved. This is not just your neighborhood association. This is not just that. It's everybody that is a part of your neighborhood. And one thing that our Adopt a Block program manager brought up, what I thought was a great idea, was that you should include the Adopt a Block captain within your area on your team as well, because they can, because they're a part of your team, you could be a lot of resources, especially from KIB, but additional things within your community as well. So that would definitely add value to your committee if you definitely had a Block captain part of your team. The next question, how big or small should my project be?
Very good question. One that even among staff, we have debated quite a bit over the past several years. What we always like to say is we want to create a wow project. But the confusion might lie in that wow projects don't always need to be big installations. Sometimes wow project can be a small little organic little space that was fitting within your neighborhood. So what we mean by wow is how do we create a space that will be inviting, interesting, and functional within your neighborhood. And that means a whole lot of different things to every single neighborhood. Because as I was saying before, even though we all call Indianapolis our home, we're all so very different. And our neighborhoods are also very different. And so what might be important to one neighborhood isn't necessarily always what's important to another. And so that's how we start to define the wow and how big. So we have done projects that have been many acres. Beach Grove, I think, with the Benedict Inn is a pretty large space. Lots of native plant installations that have gone on there. But there have been some other projects that have been quite a bit smaller. Ringgold Park over in Bates Hendricks. It's a small little park that we worked with the Indy Park system. But it's what works for each of those neighborhoods and what they were hoping for. And so really the focus for this answer is think about what you want, what your neighbors would want, and what the space actually can provide, and build your idea and your dream from that.
Well, thank you. Also, how are the Arts Council and the Historical Society involved?
Right. So again, when we get into that notion about public art, creating a space of 4 seasons of interest, we want to have these spaces offer more than the native plants and the trees that we're going to be bringing in there, more than the pathways and other hardscape elements that we're bringing in. We want to have it be something that could help celebrate your neighborhood in a new and creative way. It could be a artistic installation, a piece of public art that the Arts Council of Indianapolis will help us with. And they'll work with you and will identify artists that would be good to hire to help implement that. Or it could be working with the Indiana Historical Society, and they will help us with thinking through a variety of ways. Like I said, I brought up the Ransom Place example. There's also one in Springdale where we've installed interpretive panels that both talk about the history of the neighborhoods, but also about the history of some of the nature and some of the benefits of the trees that are in the area. And so we can be creative. And even if those two organizations are not working with your project, we will still do everything we can to make sure your space is inviting and artistic and exciting. The Devington project that Roland shared had nothing to do with the Arts Council nor the Indiana Historical Society were involved with that project. And yet it still was designed beautifully and incorporated a lot of artistic elements into it. So, yes.
And to add with that, do we have to have an art plan in place?
Now, your art piece or your art ideas, is that what you're?
We have to have something in place before we apply.
Yep. No, you do not. It does help, and it can be good to have some idea about what kind of art installations you would like or what kind of hardscape elements you would like to have in your space. But by all means, you do not need to have everything laid out in clear order. That's part of the excitement of our engagement process that Roland leads with us, is working on that with you guys. So, yeah.
And the last question, what is the importance of having a maintenance plan and a team in place? And one thing why I wanted to bring this up, because a lot of our older projects, we found that because time has went by, and then the place, because there is no one there to actually maintain the space, how it suffers. So I would love for you to speak a little bit about that.
Right. Yeah, just briefly stated. So before I came to KIB, which was in 2011, I believe, KIB would do a lot of these green spaces. They were much smaller green spaces, and we probably did about 40 of them each year. They were all very beautiful projects, very great. Sometimes the projects weren't necessarily as rooted into the community and long-term investments as they are today. And in those cases, some of those spaces really kind of fell apart and stopped existing. We don't want to see that happen. We don't want to have a space just kind of fall apart in a neighborhood. It doesn't give the neighborhood a whole lot of sense of pride and appreciation. We want these spaces to be not onerous or heavy on the capacity of a neighborhood. We want them to be supportive of the neighborhood. And so we want to think through, how do we create a space that a neighborhood can take care of, enjoy, and be involved with for the long term? So we reshuffled around our approach, and now today we do about anywhere between 3 to 6 projects each year in our GreenSpace program. This allows us a little bit more time to spend in the engagement process, in the design process, and creating a place that you guys can help maintain to the best of your abilities. And so that is the purpose of creating the maintenance plan, so that way we all understand what there is to maintain and who will actually be doing each part of that maintenance.
That was very good. Thank you, Joe, so much. So again, after this presentation, you will probably receive, and you probably will receive, a follow-up email just giving you just a 1-page or 2-pager that talks to everything you need to know about applying for our project. And then also, what was something else that I needed to say? Oh, yeah, so just if you need any type of information or if you need any type of consult, please make sure you reach out to me. My information will be on that 1-pager as well. And Joe, did you have anything else that you needed to say?
I don't think so, other than thank you all so very much for being interested in this, and we hope to see you and hear from you soon so we can get you started on your application.
All right, thank you very much. Remember to apply by May 31st. Have a good one.
Thanks.